Is it objectively bad to steal things? Yes. Is it objectively bad to rape? Yes. Provided we have agreed on a foundation. Otherwise, if my foundation is different from yours, then it doesn't matter what either of us say.
Right.
But you have a problem in the sense that the only thing you can do is claim there is some external objective, absolute standard that is God, and you can't point to a single thing that we can identify as what that is or why we should care about it.
People throw around the phrase, "you can't have morality without God," all the time. But does that claim actually hold up when someone starts asking follow-up questions? That's exactly where this discussion goes. Both sides dig into what morality actually is, where it comes from, and whether objective right and wrong can exist without a divine lawgiver. If you enjoy debates where big ideas get challenged, you're going to like this one. Don't forget to click like, subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it.
So we kind of went through, did everything come from nothing for no reason? Well, most of these I'm going to say I don't know, and I don't know that anybody else knows. I know that a lot of people assert that they know, but no, I don't think everything came from nothing for no reason. I'm currently leaning towards everything has always existed in some form or another, and that what we're seeing is change. But what caused the Big Bang? I don't know. What caused the laws of nature? I don't think anything caused them. I think they are just extant properties of the universe that we inhabit. Why is there evil? Now, this is fun because evil is a label that we put on things. And while I would agree with, at least in part, what Dr. Egner said earlier, that most of us, I won't go down everybody knows that this is wrong. Most of us generally look at the world and say, that's good, that's evil. But that's because we are incredibly lazy and don't have a good understanding of how and why we make these distinctions. But generally speaking, moral evaluations are done by comparing the consequences of an action with respect to a goal. And in some cases, we address the intent of an action. Like if I intentionally stomp on your foot versus accidentally stomp on your foot, those two are evaluated differently. But to say, why is there evil? There's evil because there's human beings. It's evil because there are those of us here who are going to evaluate whether or not a situation is consistent with a model. We don't all have the same model. Hopefully we have really, really close to the same model. And what we've done over the years is adopted this and had conversations and discussions. And we've even, in some cases, tried to legislate, although we don't simply legislate morality. But why is there evil? There's evil because people like to label things, and we've chosen to label some things as good and some things as evil, when what we're talking about is, does this benefit us in some way, or does this harm us in some way?
The question about evil, I think, is a profound question, and atheists do a remarkable tap dance around it. I mean, it's a sight to behold. The real question is, are there things that are morally wrong objectively, or is everything just a matter of opinion? That's the real question. If there are things that are objectively morally wrong, that obviously points to the existence of a divine intellect, because if it's objectively morally wrong, it means that it's morally wrong independent of human opinions. And God's kind of the only other opinion on tap in this debate. So if there's an objective moral law that's kind of out there that we are subject to, in a sense, that's a strong argument for the existence of a divine intellect.
Yeah.
And the question is there an objective moral law, or is it all just opinion?
So I'm fine with being able to make objective assessments, but I'm not aware of any model where anyone could demonstrate that there is an objective moral law that is universal.
I'm not asking whether you think people could demonstrate it. I'm asking, do you believe that it exists?
No, I don't believe in things that people can't demonstrate it exist.
So you don't believe that raping a baby is objectively morally wrong? You think it's just a matter of opinion?
So I'm on record for many years now of rejecting of advocating for situational morality, situational ethics, and rejecting the notion that because a culture says so, that means that it's so. That there are, if you define, I define morality as the well-being of thinking creatures. It's not, it's not a complete definition. It's what I think we've been working towards. I think anybody who's talking about morality is probably talking about well-being of thinking creatures, and humans in particular quite often. And so once you decide, hey, we're talking about the well-being of humans, now there are physical facts within the universe that are non-subjective that determine whether or not something is in our best interest or not. Like, chopping off someone's head is, not good for them. But it's an objective physical fact that chopping off someone's head is in conflict with those things that are good for them. And by that, I'm only talking about once you've agreed on well-being. The only objection remaining is someone could say, there's no reason why anybody has to care about well-being. And on that grounds, you don't have to care about well-being, just like you don't have to care about being healthy. But health isn't particularly well-defined either, like physical health. We're learning more and more about it, but it's not like there's some objective true standard of health. And instead, there are a model of we would like to be healthier, and we learn facts about the universe, and so we get healthier.
Yeah. I had pointed out earlier that raising the question of objective morality stimulates atheists to do an incredible tap dance. And that long string of gibberish that you just gave is a beautiful example of it. I'm just asking you, Matt, I'm asking you a simple question. Is it objectively wrong?
No.
Is it objectively wrong to rape a baby, or is it just a matter of opinion?
It's objectively wrong if the foundation of your morality holds that it would be objectively assessed as wrong.
No. Is it objectively wrong, or is it just a matter of opinion? And if it is objectively wrong, what mind does that moral principle come from?
So this gets down to how do you define morality? If you define it as well-being, once you've defined morality, then you can say, is this moral? If you're just going to say right or wrong, then I need to know what standard we're going to be using for right or wrong. And so if we're going to use mine, I didn't
ask you any of that, Matt. I said, is it objectively wrong to rape babies?
Yes
or no, Matt. It's a one-word answer. Yes or no?
No.
It's not objectively wrong to rape babies.
Well, I don't know what's. I don't. So
you're that rare, honest atheist.
No. I'm not a rare, honest atheist. I'm the guy that has given you an answer that you mentioned as gibberish, which other people have understood well enough. And that is, if we say we're going to ask, is this in our best interest or not? Then there can be an objective assessment made in the same way that, is it objectively bad to cut off someone's head? Well, generally speaking, yes, it's bad for them. And if we're just going to look at it as, hey, is it objectively bad to steal things? Yes. Is it objectively bad to rape? Yes. Provided we have agreed on a foundation. Otherwise, if my foundation is different from yours, then it doesn't matter what either of us say.
Right.
But you have a problem in the sense that the only thing you can do is claim there is some external objective, absolute standard that is God, and you can't point to a single thing that we can identify as what that is or why we should care about it.
When Matt asks why anyone should care about God's standard, that's where the conversation gets really interesting. A lot of Christians and other religious believers point to God as the answer to objective morality, but that move doesn't solve the problem as neatly as it seems. Even if God exists and has a moral code, it's still His moral code. You'd still have to explain why His preferences become objective, simply because they're God's. Saying God says so tells you where the rule comes from, but it doesn't automatically explain why it's objectively true rather than the viewpoint of the most powerful being in the universe. That's a separate argument. The deeper issue isn't whether morality has a source. Every worldview has one. The real question is what makes any moral standard universally binding instead of just authoritative to those who already accept it. That's why appealing to God doesn't end the discussion. It simply moves the debate to one more fundamental question.
Right. The tap dance continues.
No. That was not a tap dance. That was a counter to your position.
All right. The existence of objective morality outside of human opinion.
It doesn't exist.
Obviously points, so it doesn't exist.
It does not exist as a thing by itself. That doesn't mean you cannot make objective assessments with regard to a goal.
If you're making them and it doesn't exist by itself, it's a subjective assessment.
It's an objective assessment
and objective.
Well, all right. You can make an objective assessment of an action with respect to a goal. The rules yes. That's all I'm saying.
That's
okay.
Not morality.
You can say it's not morality all day long. I'm saying that my morality is based on well-being because that's something I can point to and something I can talk to people about,
sure.
And we can agree. What is your morality based on?
My morality is based on God.
How do you know what God's moral opinion is on anything?
He's put it in me.
He's put it in you. So how is that not subjective? Because first of all,
it's written in my heart.
I don't care if it's written in your heart. Because so you're sitting here saying God wrote it on your heart. Well, that's really cool for you. Doesn't help anybody else, and there's no way for you to demonstrate to anyone, including yourself, that God wrote it on your heart.
He wrote it on your heart too, Matt. That's why you don't rape babies.
No, sir, he did not, because you and I don't agree on morality. We largely agree because we're largely similar, but we don't agree on every aspect of morality. There's no evidence that a God wrote anything on my heart or has made any sort of declaration about morality. How can you demonstrate the truth of that?
So if there were a world, we'll do a little thought question here. Okay. If there were a world where every one of the 7 billion people on the face of the earth believed that it was okay to rape babies, would that mean that it was, in fact, okay to rape babies? No. Okay, so where would the opinion that it is not okay to rape babies come from if every human being on the face of the earth thought it was okay? It's not an opinion. What you're talking about is moral relativism, which I'm on record of rejecting for many, 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 many years. Convinced that God has written his moral code on your heart. I am not convinced that God has written his moral code on your heart or anyone else's. You're convinced that God's written his moral code on both of our hearts. How can we know? How can you demonstrate that God has written his moral code on his heart? And what is God's position on cloning? And how can you demonstrate? What the way I know that God has written his moral code in my heart is because I, like every other human being on the face of the earth, feels a moral code impressing on me. I don't. It is a moral code. It is a moral code that is not always convenient for me. There are many, many things I do that I would be a lot better off in a practical sense if I didn't follow that moral code. That's true of all of us. There are many people who've given their lives, who've sacrificed their lives for a moral code. There are people who act against their self-interest constantly to meet a moral code. That's the evidence. That is not evidence that God wrote a moral code on your heart. I'm sorry, but if you're going to construct, hang on. Yeah. If you're going to construct a logical argument for something, the conclusion should be entailed in the premises. And your conclusion that God wrote a moral code on your heart, is not in any of the premises that you just offered, not one. Okay. So if I sacrifice my life to save someone else, I jump in front of somebody to take a bullet for them, okay, because I want to protect that person. And I think that's the morally right thing to do. I can't think of a more obvious example of living your life and giving your life in service to an objective moral code that does you no good. There is no personal benefit to countless moral acts that people do, but they do it because they think it's right, because it's written on their heart. We all have that feeling, Matt. So, no, we don't necessarily all have that feeling. I will point out that you just engaged in an argument from personal incredulity fallacy the second you said, I can't think of any other reason to do this. And I can demonstrate that there are justifications for perceived altruism that, as I mentioned during my opening statement, that altruism is something that we can demonstrate. You're making an appeal to altruism now, but we can also demonstrate fake altruism. That as long as I live in a society that provides benefits to people who willingly put their lives at risk and sacrifice them, then there is a benefit to me to put my life at risk and to potentially sacrifice it. Whether it is a sensation in my head that I will be lauded and applauded by people all around the world, you can take an altruistic action through pure selfishness of, I want to be celebrated. I would like a statue of me that exists long after I'm gone, and therefore I will take. No, wow. I'm not. Some people do that, of course. Yes, and so the fact that some people do this means that there is and you just acknowledged it and agreed to it, means that you were wrong when you said you can't think of a reason to do this other than a God giving you this sense of morality. There are other reasons to do it. Now you have to show for any given situation that you view as altruistic, which one is it? Is it real altruism or fake altruism? And how can you tell? I mean, I think that some of it is real. I mean,
I do
if
too.
you're saying that, sorry,
I do too.
yeah. So why do people do it if it's being real?
So the only thing that's required for someone to take an altruistic step is for them to be convinced that it's the right thing to do. And you can be convinced that something's the right thing to do, irrespective of whether it is or whether it's objectively true. You can get somebody to commit atrocities once you can get them to believe absurdities. And as long as the only thing that's required for someone to act in a way that is consistent with a particular religious doctrine is for them to be convinced that the doctrine is real. It does not require that the doctrine is in fact real. And so you have to you have to come up with a way to show the difference between someone who's acting in accordance with a doctrine they believe to be real versus someone who's acting in accordance with a doctrine that is real. I don't know how to do that.
Right. But you've agreed with me that there are people who act out of respect for an objective moral law.
No, I've agreed with you that there are people who
that's
act,
not in personal interest.
I agree with you. There are people who act that way because of their belief, and whether or not it's whether they believe it's objective or not is irrelevant.
Right.
They can believe it's subjective and still do it.
So you don't believe that it's objectively wrong, for example, to kill innocent people or rape babies?
Hang on. We just went through a whole bunch of stuff. And when you got to a point where it was exposed that you were wrong about what you said, you went back to, I don't think it's objectively wrong to rape people and kill babies. That's not what we were just discussing. We were discussing altruism and whether or not there's a justification for it.
But what we're discussing now, Matt, my question is it objectively wrong to do certain things?
I've already answered this.
Outside of opinions.
I've already answered this, and I'm sorry that you don't understand it. I will try one more time.
Yeah, try it again.
When you declare what a foundation of morality is, once that's done, you can compare the consequences of various actions with respect to that foundation, with respect to that goal. And that comparison can be objective in the same way that while the rules of chess are ultimately arbitrary, they didn't have to be that way, we made up the game, it is objectively against the rules for you to move your pawn forward 4 spaces at the beginning of the game. Now, you can say, is it objectively wrong? Well, no, we could have house rules, but we're talking about these rules. So before you can make any sort of claim about whether or not something is objectively wrong, you have to have a set of rules that you're going to use to compare it to. In your case, you have what you think God wrote on your heart. In my case, go ahead.
Right. What you're talking about is epistemology, and I'm talking about ontology. That is, you're saying, how can we know what the objective rules are? It's a very fair question. It's an important question. It's a question that ethicists and theologians have asked for thousands of years. My question has nothing to do with that. My question is, do moral laws exist objectively?
No.
Ontologically.
I've already answered that 2 or 3 times. Moral laws do not exist as things unto themselves.
Okay.
Anywhere. There's been no demonstration of that. I don't even know what it would mean to say out here somewhere is an objective moral law, because it doesn't have any, so you could even say, here's what God.
I do know what it means. What it means to say that is that I don't believe that innocent people should be killed. I don't believe
that's not what it means.
Should be raped.
No, that's not what any of that means.
I don't believe that Jews should be gassed.
That's not what any of that means. That's not what any of that means. The fact that you're convinced there's an objective moral code doesn't tell you what it is. The objective moral code could be the exact opposite of what you believe. This is the thing that you've done a couple of different times, which is when you were running through your opening, talking about, oh, we all know this, and then you had a bunch of questions, and then these questions have been answered. These are the reasons why you're a believer. Well, the fact that it seems to me that you are very much, I want there to be a moral code. I want there to be an explanation for the origin of the universe. I want there to be this. And atheism doesn't offer that, so I'll go with Catholicism. And that is also fallacious. It doesn't mean that the answer there is correct.
Wanting the universe to have an answer isn't the same as discovering that it actually does. That's the point Matt is making, and it's easy to miss because it's about how we reason, not just what we believe. A lot of religious arguments start with something that feels incomplete. Why we're here, where morality comes from, why anything exists, and then treat the first explanation that fills the gap as if it has earned the right to be true. Explanations earn their place by accounting for the evidence more completely than the alternatives, regardless of how satisfying they feel. That's the standard we use everywhere else in life. We wouldn't accept an explanation in science, history, or a criminal investigation just because it feels emotionally satisfying. Yet when it comes to religion, people often lower that standard without realizing it.
I've often said that I would be more accepting of atheism as a belief if atheists actually believed it also. But atheists.
So are you saying I'm not an atheist? I am not.
Yeah, I'm saying you're not an atheist.
Okay.
Because you don't live your life that way.
Bullshit. Atheism doesn't tell you anything at all about how to live your life. Atheism is, I am not convinced there's a God, or I am convinced there's not a God. Neither of those things carry with it any sort of weight on how I should live my life. And for you to come in, hang on, I'm still talking, sir. And for you to come in and suggest that I'm not an atheist is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. But you know what? I've heard it from you and your ilk over and over and over again, because the truth is you cannot imagine a world where you're wrong.
Atheists believe in a number of things that are every bit as well defined as things that religious people believe in. They believe that there is no God. They believe that nothing caused everything for no reason.
That's not true.
They believe there's no ultimate purpose for anything. They believe there's no afterlife. That's not true. These are basic atheist viewpoints.
No, they're not. See, that's the thing.
So you do believe there's a purpose?
No, I don't believe there's an externally imposed intrinsic purpose in the universe. But what I believe
So that's what I said.
No, sir, it's not what you said. And I'm sorry that mere simple logical clarity is difficult for you. But what I believe isn't necessarily what all atheists believe. Right. You tried to create a bucket and exclude me from it. And the only criteria for that bucket in your no true atheist fallacy is whether or not one believes there's a God. I happen to not believe that there's an intrinsic purpose bestowed upon life from external, but not every atheist agrees with that. Not every atheist agrees with a great many things. So when you start making a list of what atheists believe, as soon as you get past they don't believe in a God, you're wrong.
There's far more.
Just to pause you there, sorry for a second, Michael. I think it's about time for the question and answer now, but I'll let you respond to Matt there. But I'll just say maybe try not to sort of make it too much, like there's a kind of lot left for him to say at the end of it. If you want to just kind of close out what your response is to what he's just had to say.
Matt clearly takes exception to the way I've been dealing with him. And I strongly get the sense, obviously, that Matt thinks that that's just unfair. It's morally wrong that I would interrupt him or that I'd be impolite and so on. And it's another good example how atheists don't really believe in atheism in the sense that Matt is appealing to objective moral standards, that I should behave in a certain way to him, blah, blah, blah. When his whole metaphysical perspective is that there can be no objective moral standards because there is no God. So there is no real fairness, Matt, if there is no God. But I've encountered few people who demand as much fairness for themselves as atheists. Atheists don't live like atheists. They live like theists.
We don't live like the straw men that you put up as atheists, because when you say we don't really believe in atheism, there's nothing. Atheism doesn't have any tenets, any dogma, and I'm not appealing to moral objective standards. The foundation for fairness in this debate is not because of an objective standard from an external God. It's because we, as civil human beings, agreed to sit down and share time with a moderator to ensure that we were both treated fairly. My outrage, to whatever extent it is there, is not, as you assert, appealing to some objective moral standard. It is expecting the moderator to hold you to the fire to what we agreed to, which is to allow me to finish a sentence. And if you're going to straw man all atheists, to allow me, as they are doing now, to point out exactly what you're doing, so that when this is over and you leave, you are an embarrassment.
That is a moral standard.
Yes, it is not an objective moral standard from a God. It is a moral standard that I'm holding, that we agreed to. It is by convention, not by a God. Your God doesn't owe me anything, doesn't owe you anything.
One of the most interesting things this debate exposes has almost nothing to do with God. It's about the difference between discovering rules and designing them. The Christian speaker assumes morality has to be something we uncover, like a planet waiting to be found. Matt treats morality much more like engineering. Engineers don't discover bridges hidden in nature, they design them around a goal. If the goal is to get people safely across a river, every calculation has an objective answer. A bridge that collapses is objectively worse than one that stands, not because the universe declared it immoral, but because it failed the purpose it was built to achieve. That way of thinking changes the entire conversation. We already do this everywhere else. We don't ask whether medicine is objectively about health because health itself is some mystical property floating through the cosmos. We define the goal, keeping people alive and reducing disease, and then reality tells us which treatments work and which ones don't. The same is true of aviation, engineering, economics, and law. Human beings establish goals. The world determines which methods succeed. Morality can be viewed through exactly the same lens. Once reducing unnecessary suffering becomes the objective, reality, not opinion, places constraints on what actually accomplishes it. The Christian objection often assumes that if humans participate in building a moral framework, the framework must become just opinion. But that doesn't follow. Humans also invented contracts, languages, and systems of mathematics. Those systems weren't discovered under rocks, yet once their rules exist, there are objectively correct and incorrect ways to apply them. Objectivity isn't magic, it's consistency. It's the ability to reach the same conclusion from the same premises. Ironically, appealing to God doesn't eliminate human judgment, it multiplies it. Every denomination claims to be reading the same source while arriving at different conclusions on divorce, war, slavery, capital punishment, women's roles, sexuality, and countless other moral questions. The disagreement doesn't disappear because the source is called divine. It just moves one step upstream, where people debate what God supposedly meant. That's a reminder that interpretation never leaves the picture, no matter how objective the foundation is claimed to be. Perhaps that's why skepticism remains valuable. It doesn't promise perfect answers. It asks whether the method we're using would still make sense if the conclusion were different. That's a question worth asking in religion, politics, science, and everyday life. A reliable way of thinking shouldn't only work when it confirms beliefs we already hold. It should be dependable even when it forces us to change our minds. And maybe that's the quiet irony here. People often say atheism can't explain morality. But the harder challenge isn't explaining why humans make moral judgments. It's explaining why attaching the word God suddenly removes the need to justify those judgments in the first place. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Can morality be objective without a divine lawgiver, or do you think God is necessary for moral truth? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and as always, support the original creators by watching the full debate on their channel.